Good, Matt, how are you?
Good. I don't. Great.
Still running around like crazy?
Yeah. Nuts. Busy time of year too.
Oh, I can imagine.
Kids.
So we got everybody here. Oh, look at that.
No Bob today?
No, but we were just talking, he went to Egypt.
Wow.
Trip, yeah.
How do we know when we start? Someone tells us.
I think we're good,
Yeah, ready to begin.
ready to go on your, I think they
Yes.
take your cue.
All right.
Oh,
Good morning. It's a meeting of the SELCO Commission. It's Tuesday, January 17th, 2023, 7:30 a.m. We have Maria Lemieux, Matt Beaton, Tony Trippi as commissioners, and myself, Mike Rifolo. Bob Holland is out today. First matter before us is to consider the bill schedules and warrants. They've been already passed out. Any comments on them?
No.
No comments. They'll be available for signature. Next matter before us are the meeting minutes for December 20, 2022. Are there any comments? Nope. The comment I had was, it's very minor, but sometimes commission is small c and sometimes it's capital C, so just to be consistent on capital C, I guess, for commission. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Tony, second.
Second?
Matt, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody against? Okay, thank you. Okay, next step, we're going into executive session in order to discuss, we read this, right? Strategy with respect to collective bargaining, IBEW Local 326, pursuant to MGL Chapter 30, Cap A, Section 21(1)(3). That requires a roll call vote. Maria?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
All right, we'll be in an executive session, breaking, and then coming back live. Thank you. it's live. Where does it say?
I think,
Yeah, how do you
I think he
know?
times it off of your cue. I don't think,
All right, meeting's reconvened out of executive session.
okay.
Next matter before the board, before the commission, is to review and consider approval of an annual SELCO cost of living adjustment. Chris?
All right, thank you very much. So, building off of our conversation from last month, we put together this memo here to provide some additional information, largely with respect to how a COLA adjustment, whether it be this year or any other year, generally impacts SELCO's financials. I figured I'd cover some of the key items here. So just actually to take a step back on the for COLA, generally speaking, we've tried to provide two benchmarks for reference, being Social Security and the Consumer Price Index. And so on this analysis, we've used those two benchmarks and their impact to the financials. And so just some statistics that come up from time to time. So we could see those for reference. We currently have a total of 69 employees. You can see that breakdown there is fairly equal between electric and cable only employees. We also have 6 IT employees that a portion of their salaries are reimbursable from the town, given our support function of town IT. And then we have our general and administrative roles that support all elements of the business. That's 18 folks, so that's your total of 69. So following the following chart on the top of page 2 shows the 2022 total payroll between non-union, union employees. So this would be for all 69 of $6.5 million roughly for 2022. And so what we've tried to do here is show how Social Security increase or a consumer price index increase would impact the overall financials for the total payroll. So currently, Social Security is, I believe we covered last month, is at a 40-year high. Folks that may be viewing this that perhaps have received a Social Security letter or check will have seen that 8.7% was the number applied to Social Security, as well as other government retirement plans, such as military pensions. And then the other one, which is a factor in Social Security, is the Consumer Price Index. And going back for the most current numbers, the November to November, so November of 21 to November of 22, we've seen a Consumer Price Index increase of 7.1%. And so how that applies to the overall financial impacts, you can see there an 8.7% is a $384,000 increase to what is the $6.5 million budget, and a 7.1% is a $325,000. So you're looking at roughly a $60,000 difference for those two options. And then worth noting, which we did not really cover, so part of our evaluation process incorporates a merit increase, which obviously folks on Social Security do not get. So that is anywhere from 1 to 3, with your average number of employees getting that 2% target. So 1 being folks we're trying to inspire and coach along a little bit more. Luckily, those are few and far between. And then on this opposite end of the spectrum, the folks that would have a 3% are very unique, outstanding performance. And the argument can be made, that's everyone. But same thing, we try and reserve that to be an incentive for unique achievement. So the vast majority of merit increases fall right in that sweet spot of 2%. So we've used that 2% merit And that $130,000 figure there is on that total of $6.5 million. So that would be more of a, obviously, because there's some variability there. That's if every employee received a 2% merit. You'd see that 130K. So that you'll see after all is said and done, that 6.5 million of 2022 payroll with the two options would roughly go to 7 million in the 8.7 case, or the and then slightly less at 6.95 million. So you're talking, $450,000 to $500,000 increase on both. So to put that in perspective, we included the other table just to show how that impacts each respective business unit, and happy to go through that if you have any questions. And then I was just going to skip to this last table just to show, okay, so we have those numbers. How do those numbers play into the overall SELCO business? And this is something that I think is fairly uniform across the industry, which is, what I take with me when I think of a cost of living adjustment and how it impacts a utility budget. We're a capital intensive business. And so as you can see here, we have the 2022 budgeted expense, and then we threw in a 2023 budget estimate at a middle ground of 5%. As everyone knows, the budgets aren't finalized now, but using a reasonable expense increase of what as we try and refine what today's economy would do to our budget, we just, for this purpose, landed on 5% for demonstration purposes. So you can see an 8.7% increase has a 0.45% impact on our $33.6 million budget, and a 7.1% has a 0.39% impact on electric. A little bit higher for cable. There's an asterisk there because this doesn't incorporate some of the variability of an IT reimbursement from the town. So we categorized IT employees as cable employees. So that's why their increases would inflate this number a bit. But as we can see in the table here, of a $17 million 2023 estimated budget for cable, these increases would be 1.37 for Social Security or 1.14. So across the board, you'd average about a 0.8% impact to our SELCO budget, or a 0.6. And so in both cases, these are below 1% for COLA impacts to the SELCO budget for the entirety of the workforce that we have. Because the question comes up, I didn't know I can just cover this other considerations paragraph a bit, just given our close relationship in a good way with municipal operations. And so one of the big differences, because this gets compared, and I thought it was worth noting, is utilities, whether you're, in some ways, I think for competitive reasons from the business model standpoint, obviously we know private utilities, Eversource, National Grid, Verizon, don't have any linkages to municipal finance. So the statutes for municipal finance also don't apply to municipal light plants, municipal utilities in Massachusetts. And so that's where you see some of these Proposition 2.5 considerations that are frequently discussed through town meeting and municipal finance discussions, and the levy limits for taxes. All of that provide those constraints on the COLA factors on the town, which is why you'd see a difference between how a town or municipal utility treats COLA versus the utility alone. And then same thing here, just I added in on top of that with the override. It's worth noting that there is a 4% cap year over year expense increases on the municipal budget side. So that puts additional considerations for the town budget. Again, those aren't applicable to any SELCO budgetary matters. So that's why if you hear the 4% cap being talked about, that's for your municipal services and the school budgets, not for utilities. Just in conclusion, after all is said and done, expenses are increasing for everyone, and my recommendation is based on the premise that COLA in general being used to offset the economic conditions that the workforce faces. So being a cost of living adjustment. And so my recommendation based on the numbers above is that 7.1% figure, which is below what the retirees will get at 8.7. But when you throw in the merit, I think things normalize, which of course Social Security recipients don't get.
So I know we had, at the last meeting, had questions about financial impact. Maria, Matt, maybe you were at the lead on that. Are you guys satisfied with Chris's discussion? Do you have any questions, or Tony, on that issue?
No, I'm fine with it. I mean, an important thing to think about too with the Social Security is that even though they get that increase of 8.7, they also have increased expenses for their Medicare that comes out of it. So they don't, like, the net is an 8.7 increase in what they're taking home. So that's kind of an inflated rate to look at.
The other question that came up last meeting was some kind of comparison. We talked about the town and then maybe other munis or in the private sector. I know maybe some of that's not published, but perhaps you did an informal survey or
Yes.
kind of checked around. Do you give us a sense of that?
Okay, that's a great question. So there isn't any formal survey to cite, so this is somewhat anecdotal. There is, as you could imagine, all the MLPs in many cases to make these recommendations, all general managers are facing this. So we have a little distribution group that we pepper each other with questions from time to time. COLA is always one of them. And so this is one of those unknowns. What do you come forward with? And there have been, like anything, right? You have 41 people in a room, you're going to get 41 different ideas. And so generally what we've seen is anywhere from some MLPs have how they settled on it, I'm not sure, but gone with a 5% COLA, and then they enacted, the board did I think it was $2,500 or $3,000 bonus as a one-time payment. They have the 7% number, and CPI is more commonly thrown around as a consideration. Again, those are subject to board meeting votes and dates, which have not been finalized. And there are other ones where, and I guess as another factor of consideration, some of the large utilities do have bargain units all the way to the GM, so they're already contractually bound to those commitments. And so that would be subject to a whole different renegotiation process. But in our case, we're primarily non-union, so we have the greater flexibility to make a decision now.
But it sounds like you think this recommendation's in sync with what
Yes.
other munis are doing. So any other questions before we go to a motion?
Just a comment. With percentage-wise, the cost of the people is much, much smaller than the capital expenses we do, but the people is what keep this thing going, and it's good to make sure that they get compensated accordingly.
Okay, on that bright note, motion to approve an increase of the annual SELCO cost of living adjustment to 7.1%.
Move.
A second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye as well. Anyone against? A motion carried. Next up is the a memo and presentation regarding the workplace EV charging. Who's in charge of that?
I will kick this off with your permission,
Sure.
and I have to just reconnect to my Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay. All right. Back on. Okay. And then after my little introduction, I figured if we could welcome Patrick, he did the bulk of the work, so he's got all of the facts and citations and sources all ironed out, and he couldn't help himself but to put together a presentation.
What's that? That's what you get when you get that master's degree.
Yeah, yes, that's a foreshadowing of the GM highlights. Okay, so I guess the key 3 bullet points at the top of this memo, I think were kind of the catalysts for this discussion. We had been thinking about this for a while, but as folks probably have heard through the news, the Inflation Reduction Act is injecting a substantial amount of funding into the U.S. economy for various, renewable and energy initiatives or an electrification. And so if there was ever a time to try and then piggyback on a funding effort, now is the time. So that's part one, is there's going to be all these incentives for folks to go and electrify their transportation. And so we want to build on that. Two, and I'm not sure board members receive this. I think if you have not, then you probably should. The town is, as part of their, as a quick summary, they have this consultant on board to develop a climate action plan. And as part of that, they sent out a survey to employees about whether or not they're going to consider an EV as their next purchase, how far they commute to work. And so that has the foreshadowing of the topic at hand. And then the third one is just the continued evolution of our energy programs for 23 with respect to overall achievement of our goals. So, electrification is a big effort for the state right now, for the country, but it's also we're in the electric utility business. This is good for business. If folks are consuming our product, I see that as a good thing. So this is leading into this, and before I just turn it over to Patrick, I think one of the key takeaways from this is to understand what drives people to adopt an electric equivalent of whatever mode of transportation they use. And so this will show a lot of the studies that are done to provide evidence-based support of what those decisions are. And one of the key initiatives is folks charge at home and folks charge at work. And so workplace charging is what we're looking to discuss here, and how we play a role in that. So,
All right, thanks, Chris. So as Chris mentioned, we are well positioned to enable strategic electrification as a utility. And one of those most important sectors is the transportation sector. And this results in decarbonization and load growth. So supporting EVs has a good ROI. And transport electrification requires coordinated policy, charging infrastructure, incentives, market engagement, education, and grid reliability through system upgrades and scheduled charging. And workplace charging involves many of these facets, and it aligns with our overall EV objectives, and also as an employer looking to attract and retain a talented workforce. So I conducted a bit of a literature review about best practices for workplace charging. And these were based on pilot projects and industry trends. This included federal reports, white papers, academic publications from a variety of sources. And the key conclusions were pretty consistent. There are still barriers to EV adoption. But given this, we think that workplace charging can help overcome those barriers. And that includes charging access, convenience, and consumer misconceptions. And even with overall limited charging access, still a third of charging takes place at the workplace. You can see that in the breakdown of the pie chart on the bottom left. So this is often overlooked, but level 1 charging could be a good solution for the workplace. Comparatively to level 2 and DC fast charging, the rate is quite low, meaning you get less energy over the same amount of time. The infrastructure cost is often quite low. It's just a standard 120 volt receptacle that you can plug a level 1 charger into. Many EVs come with level 1 chargers when you buy them. And just some signs where, pointing out that this is for EV charging. Bring your own charger. And the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection recommends employers provide level 1 charging in at least 10% of parking spaces. Another report predicted workers will increasingly expect and demand charging access at work as a standard benefit. And the federal government has guided all agencies to provide workplace charging at their office locations. The Department of Energy reported on feasibility, benefits, and pros and cons of making level 1 charging available at workplaces, and the conclusion was that there's a strong case for employers to provide free level 1 workplace charging. And as you can see from the graph on the right, the need for infrastructure for charging is through 2023 is going to accelerate. One of those being at the workplace, and comparatively to DC fast charging level 2, the costs to enable that are low. And these are some results from an APPA survey about workplace charging at other public utilities across the country. And as you can see, some offer free level 1, some also offer a discount on level 2, some offered free level 2. And here's just some pictures of what a free level 1 setup looks like. It's, like I mentioned, just some receptacles, and employees can bring their own chargers.
Is level 2 the other picture where it's a formal charging station, or what is level 2?
Level 2 is what you see right outside here.
Yeah, the formal.
Yeah,
Look at the
they're
next slide
higher output.
Yeah, the next picture then, the one you're in.
with you.
Yeah.
Oh yes, that's a level 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have level 2 units over here. The output of those are about 7 times higher than a level 1.
Just a faster charge.
Correct. Yep. So what are the benefits of workplace charging? This is a leadership opportunity for SELCO. We can set the benchmark for other employers in town to follow the lead. And as I mentioned, it aligns with our goals. And another data point from the report from the DOE is that employees of companies with workplace charging are 20 times more likely to drive an EV. It also attracts talent, and it drives adoption of EVs. This can strengthen our PR sustainability image. It can help with spreading out our load throughout the day. So if people are charging in the middle of the day, typical non-peak hours, that's better for us as a utility compared to someone driving home, plugging in a level 2, and then contributing to that peak that we're trying to shave. It also incentivizes employees to work at the office. Most time is spent either at work or at home, and some do not have charging available at their home, like renters, for example. So the workplace might be the only convenient solution for them to charge their car. It also eases range anxiety, and it can boost local commerce when employees choose to shop, dine, and recreate in Shrewsbury outside of work hours to leverage free or discounted charging. So we see 2 good options, possible options that can enable workplace charging at SELCO. One is free level 1 charging enabled by standard outlets, and employees could bring their own charger. The upfront cost is pretty low, and it can be covered by grant funding. The Mass Department of Environmental Protection has the Mass EVIP workplace and fleet charging program. It's under the same umbrella of grant funding that we've used for our other public level 2 stations. And SELCO's maximum financial exposure can be based on if an employee charged for 8 hours a day at 1.25 kilowatts, the level 1 rate, for 235 days a year. And that would be 2,350 kilowatt hours a year, which would cost SELCO about $250 per year per employee. And in 8 hours, someone could get about 10 kilowatt hours, which is about 30 miles in a Nissan Leaf, which is greater than most of our employees' commutes to work. So I think provided the above evidence, the benefits of providing free level 1 charging outweigh the costs. The other option is a discounted level 2 rate for employees only, utilizing the existing and planned level 2 stations, which we have some planned for all of SELCO's office locations. The cost would include administration, which is pretty negligible, and then the distribution components of delivering the energy, which could be seen as the difference between the public EV rate, which is currently the same cents per kilowatt hour as our residential rate, plus a $50 session fee. And then the employee rate, which would be the wholesale, we propose to be the wholesale price of electricity. So that would be about 11 cents per kilowatt hour currently, as projected for this year. So I think that's about it. I think the next steps.
How do you set up a level 2 station? Is that you call the contractor and they come and they install and they own the equipment, or we own it, or is it leased? Is it bought? And what's the cost to us to set up each of those?
Good question.
Good question. So we've done the projects ourselves. It was kind of like a homegrown operation. The option of contracting out is possible as well. But we leverage grant funding for the majority of costs for these. They're located on public property, so 100% of project costs are eligible to be covered by this Mass EVIP grant program, and so we've leveraged that for this station.
And do we end up owning the equipment, or is that leased, or is it
Yep, we own it.
you buy that? No.
So how much is it for one unit?
I'd say ballpark $50,000-$60,000. The whole,
Wow.
Labor,
Yeah.
everything.
That's for level 2.
Correct.
And the grant funding is available to cover the cost.
Yep.
One interesting thing to consider, a lot of the upfront costs for level 2 and certainly rapid chargers is the physical infrastructure to get, not
Yeah.
necessarily the box,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
it's the getting the juice to the local.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Right. And that's the inhibitive cost in a lot of large scale rollout of 2s and 3s. I also think this is a great job, great background and everything, but I think it's important for us to understand what are we trying to accomplish with this? Because there's a huge difference between 1, 2, and rapid level 3s. Like if you're on the road, say you're doing 300 miles in a day, and you got to go, you're just getting from point A to point B. Rapid charger, that's what's going to get people over the hump of range anxiety, right? Because you want to know you're driving a long distance, you can get it quick. I can go get a cup of coffee and get on the road. Level 2, that's so I have a EV at home. When you plug your level 2 in at home, right, and that's the the middle one that we're talking about here, 6-7 hours to fully charge the vehicle. Level 1 would take you days, if you could even do it. I don't even know if you could do it. So it's really important to understand when we're talking about workforce chargers, chargers at work. What is the intent of trying to do that? What is our intent of wanting to install those? Is it getting folks that little extra trickle to maybe just offset, an all-day park sit while they're at work, maybe offset their commute? That's essentially what you're doing.
That's what it sounds like.
Right, versus a level 2, Okay, you're sitting there. You could probably dial in most of your. That's when we got to consider. Okay, we're going to give that electricity away because now, what's my incentive? Of course, I'm going to go do that with a level 2 because I'll have to pay for my electricity at home versus there. Or do you do that wholesale discount rate, which I think is a really good idea. It's a little bit of a middle ground there. It's still skin in the game, so people don't abuse it, right? And then the level 1s again are really low impact, 120, slow trickle charge kind of thing.
Most people at their homes would have the level 2 equivalent.
Level 2 is, I don't know of anyone that put like a level 3 in their house. And a level 1, you just drive yourself
They're
crazy.
useless, yeah.
Well, my friend has a level 1. He plugs it in at night. He's
A
not
little-
going very.
It's probably a hybrid, I bet.
He's a Kia. No, and it's
Is it
he
full
gets
electric?
200 and something miles to range.
With a level 1? God bless him.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know if we should vote separately on the level 1. Thank you, Patrick. A level 1 or level 2 or both. And
Well,
any
how
other
many are
questions?
we, what are we planning, like, how many are we gonna, install if it was gonna be the level 1? Because it looks like it's just like this plug, and are we planning on employees, how many employees are we anticipating are gonna be sitting there, parking their car, charging it all day long? And how many actually use it, the level 2 that we do have? And they can't sit there all day charging, right? Isn't it more just to come and do a couple of hours? I mean, how is that working compared to the level 1 that we want to install? And how many people do we anticipate actually using it?
So, if I may,
Okay.
I should throw my perspective on that. So the way I see level 1 and level 2 deployment strategy working is I guess I'll work with, and I'll throw in 3 perhaps, but I'll start with 2. So 2, we're looking to take advantage of the grant funding to deploy these anyway. So my thought is right now we have a unit here, we have a unit at the high school, we have service area, thank you, and the future ones in the work, like Parker Road, perhaps at other school, police station, that's the other one in my head. So these are at locations where there's a significant amount of employees. Because the idea is to also provide, as we talked about budget constraints, how do we also provide an incentive for general Shrewsbury employees, teachers, DPW, officers? So if we're deploying these units, it's a minimal administrative effort to say, okay, if the schools would like to make it accessible for teachers, then great, they could, this is obviously a brainstorm, but they provide us with a form that says, okay, we confirm you're actually a teacher. Patrick goes in and programs it in. So now the schools could say, hey, we're offering a discounted charging to our teaching staff that can then say, okay, wow, I can, like myself, I pay 40 cents a kilowatt hour to charge at home. I never charge at home, I charge here. And so I'm a teacher, I'll now leverage, I'll say, that's less than gas, it's less than electricity at my house, and there's already infrastructure that the schools don't, or town, not to leave them out, but just in this example, it provides that accessibility that's purely administrative costs that we were adding them to these locations anyway because people are charging for sports events. We put it right next to the fields or, right town hall and council on aging. So it's things that we were going to do anyway. So I just see this as an additional incentive from the workforce perspective because these level 2s are here.
You got 1 unit though, and you got 100 and something employees, or
Great question.
how's that work out? I whoosied it, lights.
Yes,
Sign up sheet.
that's why I go to the gym, get ready. But yes, that's something we monitor. Hopefully, to your point, between the Inflation Reduction Act incentives to buy an EV and our potential marketing campaign to say these are available, maybe getting people over the hump. Yes, if we have rapid adoption, we could have fights in the parking lot. But, we'd monitor that for deployment purposes and see where that goes. And then where I see level 1 is, you know, parking lot development and things like that. It's literally the same duplex receptacle you'd plug your iPhone into. And so my thought is, if we're running conduits for lighting and things that you'd put out there anyway, you're running a quick offshoot and putting, like his picture, it says EV charging, you know, outlet. And so it's a minimal extra component where you could trickle charge. I'd get my whole commute back, so I'd still probably plug in. And especially in the winter, it keeps the battery conditioned. I can use departure time, so I get in, my car is gonna be 72 degrees and warm for me. You know, there's a whole nother component that provides of a level 2. And it would potentially clarify what perhaps people haven't, maybe I think about it too much, you could say that too, but you know, if you come in and bring your iPhone and plug it in, we're not going to discipline you for stealing electricity. Whereas we have a hurdle where if you see someone running an extension cord and plugging in their car into the building, are you stealing gas? So I think by having a position on level 1, if you're plugging in your car into the same outlet as your iPhone, we're starting to head off the policy component of, is plugging in your car akin to your cell phone, or you actually, is it significant enough that it's considered in an appropriate misuse of?
Would you know, the location of these spaces is also, can be a contentious issue, right? Because there's an incentive to put EV charging, another incentive to get people in EVs, give them right next to handicap almost, right? Like,
That's a good point.
1A location. Would we be considering that? And another question I had is are there studies, did you come across any studies of the usage of level 1s? Like, do people actually use them? You can put them all out, but they're only good if people are actually using them. Has there been enough time where people have even done that study?
Yep, I think in the federal reports, they had this workplace charging challenge that the DOE ran, and they found that it got the level 1, they had dedicated equipment, so it was a pedestal and a port. They didn't have to bring their own charger, and those units got a lot of use by employees. So I think it would be utilized.
Was this national? Was this a national study?
Yeah.
So we don't, what states were they in?
I don't know what states.
Yeah,
That's good.
right?
Good point. Not Wyoming.
Not Wyoming?
Another point, Maria, you had asked a question earlier, and I guess it's a point and a question. Like like my wife's driving right now into Boston, right? She'll get into a garage, she'll hopefully, you know, get an EV spot. Again, it's almost like a premium because it's right next to the elevator in a garage usually, right?
Yes, sir.
When you plug in, if it's like a charge point, which is like a company that, like, you have an app and you put your phone on and, you know, bang.
Okay.
When you hit your max charge rate, you actually get penalized, like it charges you, because, you know, otherwise everyone with an EV would just go in and like half plug in and, you know, you just sit there, right? And be like, oh, I'm charging my, so I think that's also, you know, as we go forward with level 2s around town, do we have that functionality? Is that something we would even want to, is that an issue for us?
It notifies you when you're fully charged and you gotta move your car?
Right.
Is that what it's supposed to do?
Yeah.
Yep, so the signage we have now says EV, parking for EV charging only. So that, the rule is that if you're not charging, you can't park there.
So we're doing it on good faith. We're not doing it
Yes.
we're not gonna whack them with a penalty.
No, and though I've had a discussion with planning, that would be their realm, and I guess coming up with a bylaw or something, and then cooperating with the police department on enforcement. But I don't think we can, as SELCO,
Not that
can't
big
be
an
handing out
issue.
fines for that.
No.
It's something to consider.
So the charging station will say fully charged, right? So you would have to like kind of,
You get it on your phone.
you get it on your phone, but even, does it say on the actual,
On the app, yep.
just on the app it says that? So like if you're going by the EV charging station,
Yeah,
It'll
the light
say-
turns from
Okay.
blinking blue to green.
so you would be able, so they would be able to monitor it if somebody, like like a meter maid
Yes.
going by, right?
Yeah.
Saying, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
It's
good
the
point.
next form of meter.
Yes,
yeah,
that's a
no.
good point.
I'm sorry, I'm a meter person, sorry. The meter individual would monitor this, okay. I mean, are we creating a new job position?
Yeah.
Job opportunity number 6.
Just means you gotta come to work early and make sure you get that spot.
Yeah,
There
right.
you go.
I see all these charging stations. I don't see a whole lot of cars on them, but I guess that's the whole idea, is which comes first, so.
Yes.
So it's, well, from my perspective, from a policy standpoint, I mean, this is what we do. This is
Yeah.
what we should be motivating, so. It doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of financial cost to us, so it seems like it's a win-win.
Well, how do you know if the person's, the person in that parking lot that's using
The plug and play.
is an employee?
So, well, that
Yeah.
you can,
They don't.
I was gonna say, one
do.
solution to that is,
oh, sorry.
a solution to that is a registration system and then a tag that you can put on your
Oh,
Urban
I see
mirror.
what your question is.
Like a key fob.
Yeah, like
they have
anybody
to
could,
do it.
anybody could go
Yes,
in and
yes,
like
that's what I
park their
meant.
car there
I
that,
see what you're saying.
you know, now that the parking lots are open to everybody, so they can walk the
It's a
district.
public lot.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
These are public lots.
Yes. That would be the theory is if, right, if someone was parking there, it'd be difficult to tell, but from an administrative standpoint, we can at least program, you know, it's in
You
the, it's
could
in
register
the,
people,
you
you
could
could register people,
administer
and you could monitor that.
and monitor, exactly.
It's
And
not
again-
an issue today, that stuff, but as more and more, like I read something like 10% of vehicle sales last year were EVs, and you know that's going to just keep going.
Right.
Straight
once
EVs
there's
or EV
more of 'em,
hybrid?
Yeah, I think straight EVs is what I
Wow.
was reading. Yeah, because I mean the technology in the last like 2-3 years, it's night and day. It's unbelievable. It's out there now.
All right, so do you guys want to vote separately on 1 versus 2, or just vote on 1 and 2 together?
Could I just ask one quick question? What is I think it's taking full advantage on the federal grants and you know, and certainly leveraging the state side for those level 2s. Do we have a sense of how many of those we'd be in the running for? Like how many we could feasibly leverage that to get? And is there an incentive for us? I think the more level 2s we could have out around town, I think it's just a good look, but I think it's also a great practical. It's really what the infrastructure needs, right? You know, the level 1s are great, but the more level 2s you have around, all of a sudden now it's like it's convenient and there's options, and you know, I'm at the soccer game, and you know what I mean, like that sort of stuff. Put them in as many of them as we can at the schools for the teachers and stuff like that. I think that's a great thing for us to be able to do. Do we have a sense of?
Yep, so we can leverage grant funding up to $50,000 per street address.
A lot of streets in town.
Yep,
Yeah, right.
well, that covers, for public property, 100% of total project costs. So we've been
Wow.
working with DPW on locating locations that would better serve our customers, and as you mentioned, the schools are a great place for that. So we've scoped out every single school. Hopefully we can get those out there this year and next year.
Now, when you say DPW, it's interesting because I almost think of it more as it's almost like a power system study you got to do first, right? To see where's our best bang for our buck, right? I'm sure this has been done, but where can we easily have the physical infrastructure so we're not running huge lines everywhere, right? Where's the shortest runs at the places we want? That kind of a
Yep,
look at
our
it.
engineering team is doing that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, any other questions?
So getting back to the level 1, do we know how many we're gonna install, or is it just?
I would say at least 4.
Yeah, so my thought on that is, just to, I guess, maybe clarify the ask as well, is based on this discussion, we develop a formal workplace charging policy. That would probably say, no, you can't run an extension cord through your window and plug it into your office, but it would be at designated level 1 outlets. You know, we have 4 in mind that would be an easy lift. I don't think that incorporates town hall, but I think more importantly, it would be future. You know, again, just that almost seemingly overly simplistic notion of saying, here's an outlet on, you know, with parking lots, you see the little
Yeah.
wooden bollards in front of the spaces, just
Right.
put a unit there, so it just enables that type of planning with upcoming efforts.
4 seems so little, that's it, just surprised, the number, yeah.
Yeah, and.
Well, how many employees are driving EV cars right now?
Yeah, that's
Right
true.
now.
Right, no, again.
Right, so you start off,
The hope is
small.
there's expansion, right?
Right.
And why not take advantage of
Yeah.
the grant money while it's available?
Yeah.
And I've gone around a few, I mean, I think I asked Val last week, you know, keep an eye on, like, if people either bought a car to go after the fact, but just say, what is personal, what would motivate you to spend your hard-earned personal funds on an EV?
Being able to charge at work,
So, I mean, that's,
Yeah,
100%, like I won't buy one until I.
yeah, right.
Is the level 1 enough to get you over that hurdle?
Well, I want a Lightning, so probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Do you live more than 33 miles away from
I
here?
live in Hubbardston, so in the middle of the woods. So
Yeah,
it's-
that's all right.
all right, you're a bad example.
I'm a bad example. That would be like my use case, right? I would say, yeah, for sure.
But, no, for me personally, I mean, again, it's a lot of it is influenced by your personal opinions on things, and, you know, having, to your point, to access the level 2 at a discounted rate is a great primary option. You plug it in, you know, and you let it go for half the day or so, and if it's not available, I'll plug into an outlet, and I just plug in, and I'll get in it, and it'll be 72 degrees every day of the year.
I do think if you're gonna have, I think you're gonna see a lot of, if you had a level 2 and a level 1, even if I have to pay the wholesale rate, I think you're gonna see the car in the level 2 way
Yes.
before you're gonna have the
I
level.
totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the more powerful no pun intended. The more powerful option, and it's more accessible. But I think in some ways, for me, clarifying the role of a level 1 helps from an enforceability standpoint, because there will be a time in the not too distant future, people are going to be plugging into all different outlets around the building. You know, and so if we can develop a policy that says we have dedicated EV level 1 outlets, don't plug in all over the place, you know, that just will help us.
So you have the setup for municipal employees and maybe teachers, but students will want it to. How is it going to work, particularly in the schools? Like, is this working with school committee and trying to figure out the need? Are the parking lots owned by the schools, or is that DPW? And how does this all get coordinated? Because it's not going to be a policy at that point. It's just going to be something publicly available.
Good.
Well,
Okay.
shouldn't there be a registration process? Isn't there gonna be a registration process for people using?
Well, I guess what I'm
these
saying is
that are on these
you
public?
even need the coordination with the school systems and
You do.
the need, and same kinds of questions where
I think when
who's
you get to
deciding
the
all that?
point where you're actually gonna roll out the infrastructure, there's gonna have to be a lot more, research, diligence done, all that stuff, to work with the school departments. Right now, you're just looking at what are the policies we wanna make, so as we're
Okay.
rolling out those infrastructures, what makes sense, so we have one piece of that puzzle figured out as we're going through, because
Yeah.
before you tackle how is a school gonna handle this with, students, teachers, whatnot, I think
Well-
the school would have to be in that, Patrick would have to be there with funding, and
Right.
you really wanna think through that.
Presentation, right?
Yeah.
So if I may add to that, my initial thought to your question is this subsequent workplace charging policy would, back to Patrick's point about the leadership side of things, that would be the template. So we would say, okay, as SELCO, we're allowing access to the employees to have wholesale charging at level 2, or you're allowed to charge at a designated level 1 outlet. And then we could send that to the schools or the town manager, because they'd still, like a level 1 would be behind their meter. So that would be a part of their budget they'd have to consider. Level 2, we would track, say, a teacher's charging use, and we'd bill that to the schools, or if we had one of DP. So like that, I think that policy would then have to be subsequently adopted by the other employers that have their own budgets to run.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this would allow us to create that template.
Is
Others.
there gonna be ongoing money from the government paying for this in the future, or is this,
That depends.
that's a bit,
Yeah,
For the install, right?
yeah,
for the install.
After that, it's not, you're on your own, yeah.
The level 2 we have here, is it like a charge point, like the person paying for it, or is it open access?
Yep, end user pays for it.
End user pays for it, okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
All right, we had a thorough discussion on that. We-
I guess.
Just one quick question, is the clock gonna tick on the federal grants? How quickly do we have to move on that? Do we have time to develop a policy before we're putting an application in, I guess?
But there's also
Yes.
the mass grants too, right? So like,
Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, the funding is available until exhausted, so I think there's enough funding. We have time.
Okay.
we'll
But
get in there before.
probably
it's
something,
exhausted.
come up with a plan, this is how many we wanna
Get it in
do,
there.
this is, like, if there's a cost analysis, things like that for us to be able to say, yeah, green light, go get the grants, you know, that's, we just don't wanna miss that window of opportunity, you know?
Yeah, I don't even know if we're even approving anything other than now you're going
Yeah.
forward with a
Yeah,
policy
let's go forward.
to develop a policy that maybe we approve, maybe we don't. but-
Exactly.
But isn't the policy that we provide, is the policy we provide level 1 free and discounted rate for level 2?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean,
Right,
Is that the is that
That
the
would be our
policy?
draft.
What,
that's what we're agreeing.
is that what you're
on.
trying to enact here?
yeah.
Yes, that
Yes.
would start our draft. We'd come back and more formally propose.
All right, so maybe a motion to, for SELCO to develop a policy for free level 1 outlets for workplace employees and for discounted outlets for level 2 based on public fund granting,
So
grants, I guess.
Second?
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Myself, aye. So, anyone against? Motion carries. All right, next is the, Chris, your general manager highlights. We're running a little over,
I
so
know. All right.
make it very highlighty.
Yes, very good.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
All right, and so starting with the legislative bits here, I'll highlight the theme of why I had opted to include some of these here. I'm sure everyone has seen a lot of the news feeds on the role of gas and asthma and things like that, and so this one's more local with respect to in Massachusetts, shrinking natural gas's role in heating new buildings. Again, monitoring this as obviously part of our endeavors as an electric utility. So I just throw that in there. Actually another point made earlier too with respect to EV charging. A lot of this is important to keep an eye on with respect to our grid. Looking at how this would impact our load, our capital planning, our, circuit upgrades, things like that. So just wanted to, call attention to that. And to your point, Val has now made each of these titles a hyperlink, which is very,
It is very
fancy.
convenient, Val.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
now you can click on those.
Yeah.
Very easy to review and read, so much easier.
So if you're interested, you can now click. So let's see, municipal cost, I just found that interesting a little bit as these studies come out, just looking at how climate change would impact municipal expenditures and running a community. So that I thought was interesting. Energy storage, again, not to go through each of these, but just as another tidbit, as we explore further discussions with engaging with a DeLorean. I guess that's a little bit foreshadowing of more conversations to come, but we're looking to engage in some storage development in town with DeLorean. So that's just the battery related. Per the conversation we just had, I threw in a couple transportation tidbits. Basically, both are saying that transportation and electrification is a major focus on all levels. Wind power, we kind of talked about that. Again, we're pushing forward. We unfortunately were part of that mess where a lot of the agreements that we had are no longer in place. So we're continuing to work through that with MWIC. And that's just an uphill battle. Just on the rates front, I thought that was an interesting tidbit that Connecticut electricity bills are the highest in the continental United States. And the interesting point on that one too is not necessarily by kilowatt hour, but also by actual bill. So there is an important note that Massachusetts is pretty high. Our average bill in Massachusetts just kilowatt hour consumption happens to be lower, so the total bill comes out lower. So that title could easily be held by us.
The bill went from 300 to 750 with National Grid last month
Oh,
for
my
the
God.
rate increase.
Jeez.
Yep.
Oh,
So
Shrewsbury's sounding better than Hubbardston.
Yeah.
yeah, there you go.
My God.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, EVs, I threw that in there. Okay, then just calling attention to the HR, we hired Jerry and Darren. So that's great, a first-class line worker, and Darren comes to us from Sterling. So those are two exciting hires. We on the apprentice line worker, again, it's so funny that some of these postings are hit or miss. We have 150 applications this round. Sometimes we get 0. So
150.
150. So that's we're working through those. And oh yes, and as noted earlier, Patrick completed his master's in public administration at Clark. So congratulations, Patrick. A couple of quick things here I just wanted to make sure I touched on in the communications space. We have the SELCO Nesson Scholarship coming up, as we do every year. So just wanted to put that refresher in people's minds. There was a question at the prior meeting, which we tried to answer here in this section with respect to the share of the warmth funding. So that table and analysis is there. I guess in the interest of time, if you have any questions.
I thought that was important, and I appreciated the discussion. The only thing I didn't see is how many donees there are, and maybe the average donation, just to get a sense of how much what the participation level is.
Good question. I don't know that off the top of my head. Plus the number of product sales, we would include that too.
Oh, yeah.
With the,
Just to get an idea of what the program really is.
yep, great question. I don't know that off the top of my head. So we'll circle back on that too. Billing system, we're working on that. So then the other one, I know, just tying local activity with perhaps news you've seen on Christmas Eve. There was that capacity scarcity condition, scarcity, potato. So all of our generating units were running, and I guess, being able to not resist the ability to inject a little bit of opinion / perspective on that. That was, I feel like ISO was downplaying that a little bit. And so basically our estimates show that we were not far. I mean, not to inject any type of concern, but all the generation units were running. We were on oil and the oldest units in the region. I would prefer not to be in that situation, but the SELCO system performed well. Our substation employees were on the spot and responded quickly and had everything up and running. So that was really good. Plus, on just the LMP prices, $2,200 a megawatt hour. But we had our hedging strategy in place, and so luckily we were insulated by that. Insulated to that. So those were the big ones there. Again, happy to answer any questions on that. But
Was the natural gas prices coming down?
so they were up. So that's they
They
were
were up,
running
are they
oil
coming down
units.
now, or?
And down. Yes, well, with the weather, they're lower now.
Yeah.
But yes, they at that particular moment,
Yeah, they
oil
were high,
was
This,
yeah. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
And let's see, the GTA publications and some the other DSM. So I guess those were the real talking points I wanted to add. We have our typical operations report in there for cable and electric.
In fiber to the home, is that slowed down because of the winter weather, or is it still going on?
It's still going. That's one thing about I guess there's a lot of things with nice warm weather. But that is still going. We continue the push to leverage the fact that the pipes aren't totally frozen and we don't have 10 feet of snow to dig through. We are at a point where we're highlighting a little bit here. We're at a point where we've had certain contracts for a while, so we're going to start trying to rebid these for the spring. And we had this one IFB 6 who just wanted to call attention to. We can't send the cancellation notice to this contractor. They were started with 2020, and subject to anyone correcting me, this was the firm that we reported out that went bankrupt, being Tri-Wire. Then ITG took over, and we just can't get resources dedicated through them. So part of this rebidding effort and a refresh for 2023, we're canceling that contract. We're going to finish that internally.
How many contractors do we have now?
So right now, with this cancellation, we will have two. Two dedicated to fiber, and then we have two dedicated to underground construction. And so those two fiber contractors are currently under agreement. We're not rebidding that. They're doing a good job. But the underground contractors, it's just time. We need to rebid that. We've spent a substantial amount of money on that.
All right, any questions, other questions on the highlights?
No.
All right, no other matters before the commission. I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.